Earning Freedom, Conquering a 45-Year Prison Sentence is really the first book of my series that anybody should read if they want to figure out what kind of strategy can empower you through a challenging time over a sustained length of time, meaning multiple years or multiple decades. And I want to talk with you about what prompted me to write that book. So I'm just going to speak to you as if we're having a conversation one-on-one with hopes that it will help you understand the purpose of earning freedom. So I was perhaps in my 22nd or 23rd year of incarceration. I knew I was getting closer to my release date, and I got an invitation from a professor at Stanford. Her name was Joan Petersilia, and she'd been a mentor of mine for many years. I first reached out to Joan in the same way that I reached out to many professors at Harvard and Princeton and the University of Chicago, because I was always trying to work to advocate for change. But for me, it was a very long, sustained goal. It wasn't something that was going to happen overnight. You see, when I went to prison, we were at the dawn of mass incarceration. We were building prison populations. In fact, I went into prison when there were only about 35,000 people in federal prison, only about 6 or 7 United States penitentiaries. So it really had started to grow in the late 1980s, early 1990s, when the government launched its war on drugs. So I was in my 22nd year by then, and Jill wrote me and told me that she was writing a new book with a co-author named Kevin Reitz, who was another law professor, and she invited me to contribute a chapter about what it was that inspired me to adjust in the way that I adjusted while going through multiple decades in prison. And I was so excited to write this chapter and make a contribution to the conversations that were going on around the country on the need for reform, because this was an era when there were no opportunities for people to work toward earning freedom. So I believed that we had a bad system in the United States. I believed that our prison system was more in line with a communistic system, where it removed all incentive and all power from the individual, and it put it all in the hands of the government, they would tell people where they would sleep, with whom they would share a cell, what they would eat, what they could study, with whom they could communicate. And there was just no way for a person to pursue a better path toward a faster release date. So they were not incentivizing excellence, which is just the opposite of America. In America, the harder you work, the more opportunities will open. And I wanted to see a system that way, and that's what I wrote about in that lengthy chapter. And she came back with so much encouragement, telling me that she wanted to publish the piece in her book alongside other scholars like her and others, that I just said, well, this is going to be great. It's going to really help me build this path when I get out to advocate for federal work release programs, incentives that people could work to advance and accelerate their release dates, and other incentives. So that's really what prompted me to write Earning Freedom, Conquering a 45-Year Prison Term. And if you read the book, you're going to see that it begins with the day of my arrest on August the 11th, 1987. I'll always remember that day, because you wake up thinking everything is going to be the same as every other day. But on that particular day, I learned that DEA agents were coming to arrest me in response to a sealed indictment. So there wasn't anything I could do about it. I returned home. I faced the music. And of course, the officers at that time wanted me to cooperate, but that wasn't my path. I don't ever make a judgment call, but I didn't want to cooperate with the government. I wanted to believe that somehow my attorney could prevail. I had hired an attorney who told me what I wanted to hear rather than what I needed to hear. And that's a lesson that I think every individual should be thinking about, right? Think about what you want. Define success in your life. And if you could figure that out, I think that that's like a first step toward architecting a strategy that will help you put this in the past and start working towards something better. But I didn't do that. I didn't know how to do that. I was arrested because I was facing a very serious drug case called a continuing criminal enterprise. It's the most serious drug case that the government has. It's called Title 21, Section 848, and it carries a minimum sentence of 10 years and the possible sentence of life in prison. So because of the severity of my sentence and that particular era, the detention officers locked me in solitary confinement. And I'd never been in custody before, so I didn't really even know what that meant. When they locked me in solitary confinement, I later learned it was called the Hole, or the Special Housing Unit. I just thought that's what it was going to be like. And so I'm in this cell by myself, and small. I can't open my arms, and if I open my arms, I would be touching both sides. There's just a little steel toilet sink contraption, and not even a bed. It's just a slab of concrete. It's called your rack, and they give you a little thin mattress or mat, and that's where you spend all of your time. And in the beginning, as I wrote in the book, the only thing I wanted was to get out of jail. And I had an attorney telling me that with the right amount of money you can win. And at that time, I still had some money. So I thought I was going to prevail, and I made every bad decision the guy could make, because in my case, I was guilty. I was not innocent. I broke the law. I made bad decisions, but despite that, I went to trial in knowing that many people were going to be testifying against me. But I didn't really judge what other people were doing. I was only looking at what am I going to do? What can I do? And I went to trial, and believing, having a little too much confidence or belief in myself that I could persuade somebody, I decided to testify on my own behalf, and got on the witness stand and put my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, so help me God. And then I proceeded to lie, saying that I didn't do it. And the prosecutors were framing me. It was just foolish. The wisdom of a 20-year-old that's really living during the recklessness of youth. That's who I was at that time. And I made a lot of really bad decisions, including what I said on the witness stand about not doing it. The jury saw through it. They convicted me of every count. And bang, now I am facing life in prison. And it was at that moment that I started to change my life. It was at that moment that I realized I had disappointed my family. My grandparents wouldn't speak to me. My sisters were dealing with the a very uncomfortable reality that their brother had been convicted of a very serious crime. But they were all supportive of me. And I just realized at that moment, when I went back to solitary confinement, I had made a catastrophically bad decision. I instead of accepting responsibility and identifying with the victims of the crime, there was no weapons in my case, but of course, drugs that permeate society has a bad after effect on the people who choose them. Even though they're only consenting adults making their own decisions, I played a role in a bad path. And for the first time, I kind of start to realize that. And I will say there was an officer in the jail, and I think I write about that in Earning Freedom, that really changed my life, because he brought me some books. And those books were the first time I started to learn about philosophy. And at that time in my life, I like to say I probably didn't know how to spell philosophy. I certainly didn't know what it meant. But when I start flipping through the pages, I read this story about Socrates, who was in jail. And because of the way that he responded to a death sentence that was imposed upon him, it really helped me to see things differently. It helped me to start asking Socratic questions, like, is there anything that I can do while I'm in here to potentially persuade people to see me as something different from what I am? And that's a Socratic question, because it causes me to think. It causes me to develop critical thinking. And I'm locked in a cell and thinking about, well, people probably like you who are watching this video and thinking, is there anything I can do while I'm in here? And I come across, well, yes, there probably is, but you don't get that message in prison. You see, prison is an environment that seems really exquisitely designed to obliterate hope. And the hope in my life had been leaving, because I'd already been in solitary confinement for a year, and I didn't know what I was going to do. So I started thinking, well, if there is something, what's it going to be? And I came up with this three-pronged plan by just projecting into the future the people that I would meet: a future probation officer, a future warden, a future case manager, a future employer, a future business opportunity. What could I do to have those people see me not as a coke dealer, but as somebody who responded well to struggle? And that pondering on that question led me to a three-pronged goal. One, people would want me to get an education, because if I focused on education, that might show that I don't want to be a criminal anymore. Two, if I focus on contributing to society in meaningful, measurable ways, that might show that I don't want to be a criminal anymore. And three, if I build a strong support network, that might show that I don't want to be a criminal anymore. And so it was that path that became my compass, that guided me all the way through prison. And I always had to believe that there would be more opportunities in the future than there was in the past. I was 23 years old on the day of my arrest. I was 49 years old when I finished my prison sentence. So I spent 9,500 days as federal prisoner number 16377-004. But all through that journey, I had a vision of how I wanted to get out. I wanted to be able to put on a suit and tie, and people would not know that I served a day in prison unless I told them. But of course, I built a whole career out of telling people what prompted me to go into the system. And in Earning Freedom, I describe all of the challenges and the obstacles that you have to overcome when you're living in that kind of environment. So this book is designed to help people who are at the beginning of a crisis or in the midst of a crisis to see what can be different. What can I do? And I try to get them to see, hey, there's going to be a lot of obstacles and a lot of challenges. But what you want to do is figure out, how do you break through? How do you figure out a way to succeed in spite of all the resistance that you're going to face? Because you're going to face resistance. And this book I tell in three parts. The first part, I model that after Julius Caesar, the play by Shakespeare that says, Veni, vidi, vici. I came, I saw, I conquered, right? I came into the prison system blind, afraid, not knowing what was going to come, outsourcing all of my decisions to a defense attorney, right? I came in, that's how I came in. But after spending a year in solitary confinement, I transitioned into a high security penitentiary, a very violent federal prison. But while I'm there, I saw, and I knew I hated being in prison. So I knew I needed this plan to get me through, not only to get through serving the time, but to get through with my dignity intact, with opportunities to live a life of meaning and relevance and contribution and dignity. And in order to do that, a person needs a plan, a person needs a compass, a person needs a guide, a person needs hope. I found that hope by reading about people who had gone through struggle, whether it was Viktor Frankl, who had to endure the horrors of living in a Nazi concentration camp and seeing his family murdered, or rather it was Frederick Douglass, a man who was born during the era of slavery and had to figure out, after he escaped, how to read and how to communicate and how to write, and then use his story to help other people see why slavery was bad. So that strategy is really what got me through the journey. I came and then I saw how other people changed their life. Nelson Mandela, a man who only wanted to make the world better, but we incarcerated him for 27 years. I could identify with that because that was about the length of time that I would serve in federal prison. And then I conquered. Then it shows how persistence and perseverance and resilience helped me grow stronger through that journey. And so Earning Freedom, Conquering a 45-year prison sentence, tells that story from the day of my arrest on August the 11th, 1987, until 9,500 days, actually 9,135 days later, when my wife, Carol, picked me up outside of a federal prison and drove me to a halfway house in San Francisco on August the 13th, 2012. And I describe that story, and then in the epilogue, I talk about my first year of living, the last year, I should say, first year of living in society, last year of living in prison, which takes us through the 9,500th day, was the first time I woke up after that on August the 12th, 2013, and I was finished with the Federal Bureau of Prisons and began building my career and building my life That's what earning freedom is about. It's about giving people a perspective. How do you stay strong? Develop a powerful mindset to get you through the journey. And I hope that you find value in earning freedom. If you're going to read any of our books or use any of our books to help your loved one or help yourself while you're going through challenge, start with earning freedom. My name is Michael Santos. I am the founder of Prison Professors. We are a nonprofit. I hope that you will follow us on social media and you will share the message with as many people as possible. This is our work and our commitment to advocacy to change the system so that more people can emerge with their dignity intact, opportunities to thrive. I'm Michael Santos, and I believe in you.